Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the live webinar, which we are hosting today on the scope of digitization with garment factories. My name is Amit Gugnani, and I am a senior partner with Technopak Advisors. Technopak, as you might know, is a management consulting firm based out of India, which has been serving garment factories in either starting up new plants or in performance improvement of existing plants across the Indian subcontinent, Africa, and uh, and maybe a little bit of Southeast Asia. So what we typically do is implement best practices and a lot of lean tools in bringing in improvements and using our methodology of operator training and supervisor training to manage the change in the overall factories. I am today extremely delighted to welcome Fred Isenberg. Fred is a dynamic leader with over 30 years of experience with leading software companies servicing apparel, footwear, and fashion industry space with leading supply chain software solutions. Fred is recognized for transforming organizations and driving substantial growth. His expertise includes enterprise leadership, customer relations, software development, lifecycle management, change management, and project management. He excels at building high-performance teams and providing consultative sales facilitation. His strategic thinking, problem-solving skills, and confident decision-making define his inspirational leadership style, which empowers others to excel. Renowned for his exceptional interpersonal and communication skills, Fred's customer-centric and visionary approach, combined with his proven track record, makes him a trusted consultant and vital asset to the organization. Fred has traveled to hundreds of factories around the world throughout his career and worked closely with owners, factory management, engineers, and leading industry consultants to focus on factory productivity, digitization, and optimization. He's currently the Vice President of the Application Solutions Group at CGS. Hi, Fred, and welcome to this edition of webinar. As mentioned earlier, I'm extremely delighted to have you today, and we will talk about various facets of digitization, how it gets applied to garment factories, what should be looked at while looking at digitization, and how does it impact in bringing improvements with the garment factories. Great to have you here. Do you have any opening remarks, Fred?
Yeah, so Amit, it's really great to be here, and thanks to everybody who's joining us today. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. A lot of great topics we're going to cover, and I know we'll get some great questions from the folks that have joined us as well. So I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Sure. So Fred, to start with, there's been a lot of talk of digitization and a lot of articles that have got published around it. And we thought it might be a good idea to chat upon various aspects on, how digitization impacts garment manufacturing today, especially how does it help in improving garment processes, and how does it help in making the garment processes more robust and almost future-proof. So while we all know that sourcing landscape has been changing over the times, and especially when it comes from consumer demographics, where the consumer wants something new every time they go in the shop, which has also kind of forced all the retailers and brands to look at a very different offering to what they were used to planning in the past. How do you think these trends are emerging, and how will they continue to emerge going forward?
I think it's a great question and a great way for us to start the discussion, because I think that to frame why digitization is so important, it's important to take a step back and look at how did we get here, what's happening in the world right now, and how does that impact the factories? Because I think what factories experience is a direct result of what their customers, which are typically brands and retailers, globally. And they're under incredible pressure. They're under margin pressure. They're under time pressure. They're under government pressure. And all of this has caused them to heavily digitize from the idea all the way to the end consumer. They've adopted incredible technology to forecast demand for different segments of their businesses. Even brands now and retailers are kind of blurred. It's hard to tell the difference anymore because of omni-channel. So you mentioned the assortment mix is so much bigger and broader now. So you have more SKUs to make the same dollars. And you need to deliver those much quicker. And the retailers and the brands are postponing their sourcing decisions to the very last minute, which puts a lot of stress on the supply chain. On top of that, you have governments around the world that are very concerned about forced labor, where the origin of goods are, tracing every aspect of what's happening. And that's coming directly from the consumer. And as the consumers that were younger are now emerging and have purchasing power, that new consumer is very, very much worried about the world. They're worried about the health of the world. They're worried about, the way businesses conduct, and they want to know who made the fabric, who made the fiber, who made whatever in the garment they're buying. They want to know where it comes from. They want to know that it's ethically sourced. They want to know who did everything. And in order to do that, and if you think about all of these factors, which is speed, more SKUs, more government, and the only way that you can cope with these conditions is through digitization. A human being just can't process this much data that fast, make the right decisions, make things on time, make sure the fabrics, trims are there, make sure their factories are efficient, the defects are as low as they can be. So all of these things are putting incredible pressure now on the factories. And another trend I think that's very, very important, and you and I have seen this because we've been at these meetings with these large retailers that are meeting with their vendors, and maybe some of you on this webinar have experienced this, where the retailer is suggesting that you adopt digitization, advanced digitization in the factory. That's how they were about 10 years ago. And where it's moved now, we're seeing retailers actually going and doing pilots with factories and having those factories systems integrate to their systems so that they're getting real-time data, and they're starting not just to ask and say it's a good idea, they're demanding it, they are demanding participation, and they are using it as a indicator of whether or not they're going to keep the factories, because every one of the brands and retailers is trying to reduce the number of factories they're sourcing with. So when you look at it, digitization plays such an incredibly complex role and an essential role that factories have to take notice, because it's becoming a life and death thing. That's what we see in the trends have evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think the whole process has got so VUCA, it's so volatile, it's so ambiguous, not just from a manufacturing perspective, but also from the retailers, because they are also not used to handling so many SKUs, and it makes it so complex for them. And then it obviously unless they have data, they'll not be able to analyze where their production is. And I think that's where the complexity and digitization go really part and part, because it solves a very large issue as far as the data, and makes the whole system more robust, information more transparent, and helps both the manufacturer and the supplier to be able to work more efficiently. So given this background, and as we speak about digitization, how and what aspects of manufacturing should be looked at to digitize, in your experience?
So in my experience, I think you have to look at everything. which is a daunting answer to a question, particularly when you look at it from the vantage point of the factory. But I think factories are being exposed to a lot of brands and retailers' systems where they have to use their PLM systems for product specifications. They have to use their sourcing systems for product testing and all the pre-production steps. So they're being forced to utilize other people's systems, and that often leads to a lot of inefficiency, because those systems really don't help you run your factory any better. And yet there's all this demand on speed and quality and delivery schedules that are outrageous in order for the retailers to meet the timelines they're trying to meet. So I think what's very important is that the basics need to be looked after. So when I think of basics for a factory, it's raw material management, right? Purchasing controls. It's those kinds of things to make sure if you don't have fabric, you can't cut air and get a garment. As much as we would like to try, the fabric has to be there. The trims need to be there so that the lines don't get interrupted. But you don't want to be over inventoried either. So having really good inventory control, I think, is important. When you look down at managing the shop floor, I think it starts at making sure that you have each one of the operations well detailed, and those rates that are set, the standard allowed minutes, the SAHs, and there are a lot of tools out there that help you to do the motion time studies and to calculate correctly what the right method and what the optimal way to do an operation. So the engineers interacting with those tools are important. And then I think there's managing the shop floor itself, managing the factory. And I think there's a lot of systems out there that are they track WIP, but they don't necessarily add value. They don't help in the decision-making process, the critical decision-making process. So having a shop floor system that's driven through RFID, that is interactive with the terminal in real time on every operator's workstation, every quality inspector roving around with those types of things, so they can get real-time quality in the line, so that in the end you can analyze how effective your factory is, how effective each operator is, what defects are occurring, where are they occurring. Is it a particular style that's problematic? Is it particular sets of operations that are problematic? Where are these defects? How are they occurring? And being able to make decisions in real time, I think, and learn how to do that so that it becomes a continuous improvement type of tool. Factories have to get better every day. What we see is that most factories around the globe are very inefficient. They're running between 40 and 50% efficiency, and yet they're being challenged with cost. So you need a solution that's going to help drive information to make decisions that are going to push that efficiency up, bring the quality defects down, which of course is a killer. And so those are the kinds of things that I think that factories really need to be looking at, are those types of tools.
Those absolutely, Fred. And I think while what you kind of intended to mention was that across, if you look at the facets of manufacturing, it starts with the PLM, integrates into ERP, and then there is a shop floor control and manufacturing process control, and all of them need to synergize and talk to each other as digitized tools to give you a very, very effective solution. But I think since we are focusing, and it's a vast field, it's you can have talks and discussion on PLM separately and ERP separately, and so on and so forth. But I think for today's discussion, I'll rather like to focus on shop floor, so that we get to understand how does digitization on the shop floor impacts the kind of operational performance, and how does it brings in the kind of improvements that factories want to do but are not able to do themselves. And I think it's a catch-22 every time I go and meet clients. They do want to improve. They understand that they are not making as much money as they used to in the past. uh, but yet are kind of confused in terms of how do they look at the process of improvement, and in doing that, getting a sustainable, kind of a initiative which ensures that it's not just for today, but it remains for a lifetime and gives them that improvement continuously, is something that's important for them. So, with this background, what do you think in your experience? And I know, you run a Blue Cherry software solution, which is probably the best solution globally, especially for shop floor control. What do you think have been the typical advantages on operational efficiencies with factories who have digitized the shop floor with a solution like this?
It's a great question, and it's one that we work on every day in every one of our customers. And I think over the past 40 years of doing this, we've learned a lot. And as our factories get more challenges, as they need to move quicker, more efficiently, they don't have time to correct mistakes. The software has been tuned and built to be a decision support tool, and a decision support tool for everybody in the factory. It actually holds everybody accountable for what's happening, because it's measuring and managing and helping decisions happening in a real time. So think about what factories are challenged with. Operator efficiency. How can an operator get more efficient? Well, number one, if they have a terminal on their workstation, as they scan the bundle or the work unit it can tell them how much time they have, and it can pace them. And so getting that kind of feedback directly from the system, people are competitive. Most operators are not lazy. They want to do a good job.
That's
And
true.
and this helps them create that sense of urgency. If you think about any kind of problem solving, Amit, there's a difference between people that, I always say there's two types of people. There's people that make something happen, and then there's people that wonder what just happened. And so what this does is this turns this everybody into individuals and teams that can make something happen, because they're getting the information in real time. They can react. So let me give you an example of just how complex things get. What happens when a machine breaks? An operator raises their hand, right?
Yeah.
And then they're waiting for a supervisor who's busy with somebody else. They get over there about 15 minutes later and say, "What's wrong?" "Well, my machine is not working correctly. Look at the stitches are skipping," or whatever. And then they call the mechanic. Well, what can happen in a real-time system is the operator can take themselves into an off-standard situation, saying their machine is down. The message goes directly to the mechanic, who comes out, fixes it, and 10 minutes later, quicker than the supervisor could have gotten there, that operator's back up running and sewing. Then there's the case where the operator doesn't even tell you the problem, and then at the end of the line in an inspection, we find all these skip stitches, and then we have to track back and figure out, because we know every operator, every machine, what the defects are. We have quality inspectors that are going around in line that are capturing defects in the line. They're able to proactively maybe get that mechanic there, because the operator didn't even know the machine wasn't working correctly. So a lot of times, and then that reflects in the efficiency of the operator. So when you think about efficiency in a factory and then focus it on an individual operator, sometimes there are just root causes that have nothing to do with the skill of the operator. It has a lot to do with everything else. So, so proactive maintenance on machines, again, that can be scheduled through a maintenance application. So you get the idea here that when the lines are out of balance, how do you balance them? Who has the skills? If somebody's absent, again, having all this information and then training the factory on how to utilize it. I think oftentimes what happens, people buy technology and then they kind of use it in a mechanical way. You and I've had these kinds of discussions. And so it's also about making sure that the factory is trained on how to take the data and turn it into actionable information and put that into standard process and procedures so that they're operating and taking advantage of the real-time information. And that's, I think, the thing that's the key is getting new learned behaviors to take advantage of it. I hope that answers your question, Amit.
No, it does. And I've always been wondering, we end up making layers and layers of people in the factory. I'm sure at some point of time, not too far in the future, we will see a digitized factory, which is work where the operator comes in, gets on a station, starts working, and it's so completely digitized that you don't need a quality resource to come and monitor and bang a hammer saying that you're not doing right or not doing right, or maybe you even don't need a supervisor. I mean, uh, I'm yet to come across a factory like this which gets to that level of working where you can start where you can be so uh, efficient yourself as an operator. You come on the station is digitized, you scan in, you punch in, and you know what and how you need to do. And I think that can be a good future factory somewhere. But purely in terms of numbers, Fred, I mean, again, from your experience, do you think uh, a shop floor control digitization will give you about 15-20% improvement or more?
I think from an efficiency perspective, and we measure this, we actually, we set goals with every customer that we do, whether it's a full factory rollout or a pilot to prove the concept, which I highly recommend factories entertain because they'll be shocked at what can happen. I always like to make a bet with factories as if you give me 2 of your lines and then put us up against the best line you have in 3 months, 6 months maximum, we're going to be outperforming your best line by 30%.
Yeah.
So there is, the best factories in the world are running at 85% efficient. Most of the factories that we see, particularly in Asia and South Asia, are running between 40 and 45% efficient.
That's true.
Which means you have a long way to go to get to that 85% best in class. So what that means when you translate that down, 30% improvement in efficiency means you can make 30% more product with the same number of operators. That's what's at stake here. And the way that happens is through all of the decision making, all of the the nature of the way the system works. And then from a quality perspective, so 30 to 50% is a normal expected outcome for a factory in Asia after 6 months, which is remarkable, really.
That's remarkable. That's absolutely remarkable.
The other statistic that's very important is that you're going to see a reduction in quality defects of about 20 to 30%. And when you think about that, every time you have a defect, you have a problem. You have rework, you have a number of things that cause the efficiency of the factory. And because the shop floor is measuring all these things, giving you information, it allows you to focus the people where the problems are, not where you think they are. The data doesn't lie. And I think once you learn how to use the data, turn it into actionable information, which you keep hearing me say, actionable information. Data is interesting. Actionable information is money. And that's the thing that you have to look at is every time you improve efficiency by 1%, that goes right to the bottom line in some form or fashion. So when you think of factories that you mentioned before, factories are challenged with margins. Well, the reason they're challenged with margins is you can no longer just throw cheap labor at it because right now labor isn't cheap. That's one problem. And the other is that it doesn't make anything faster. So, this is, the digitization enables you to have speed, improve efficiency, and reduce quality, all while you're going faster, which translates into the bottom line of a lot of money in these factories.
And plus, as a complement, it also helps you to manage the complex environment you are in today because the volumes are only going to reduce going further. and you will be able to, you will have to deliver faster, and so that's the kind of complexity we are living in today. And I think that's where digitization makes us very, very serious impact. And very interesting thing that you pointed about operational efficiencies, and you talked about, minimum of 20, minimum of 30 to 50% is a value that can be unlocked by looking at, a better analysis of data. And so what comes to my mind is also, about people, and about, not just workers, but supervisors, quality. And I'll come to that in a while, because I think that can be a very interesting thing to discuss on how can digitization not just capture data, but also become a training tool. And I'll come to that in a while. But before that, broadly, how much time do you think it takes for, say, a factory of 500 machine to get completely digitized on shop floor?
So it all depends on the approach and the philosophy of the factory. You can digitize an entire factory in under 6 months.
Okay.
But most factories are reticent to make that level of investment without a proof of concept. So oftentimes what happens is you'll spend the first 3 to 6 months doing that proof of concept in 2 of the lines to get the company, the factory and the factory owner comfortable of making the rest of the investment. They want to, they want to see, there's a saying in the U.S., show me. I'm from Missouri. Missouri is a state in the U.S., and the state flower is the show me. There's a flower called the show me. So people always say, I'm from Missouri, and most factory owners are from Missouri. They want to be shown. And we're happy to do those kinds of proofs of concept. They're not, they're a great investment, and they give you a lot of confidence. And I think, you mentioned a little bit about the operators. It really makes people happy. People love to know how they're doing. They're competitive, and this really gets their competitive juices going. It empowers them, and it creates a lot of excitement in factories. In fact, we just finished a pilot in Egypt with a very large intimate apparel company globally called Delta Galil. They're a billion-dollar plus company, intimate brand based out of the Middle East. And in this factory, we ran a 6-month pilot, and the results that we got were just what I told you about. And they were very, it was not easy to get them to initially invest, and there wasn't because they didn't have the money. And once they saw what it was, they couldn't wait. And this was a 1,000 machine factory, and we just got the order to upgrade that factory from the 100 machines that we did in a couple of their lines. Those are the kind of stories that happen over and over and over. And seeing is believing. And so I think hopefully that answers your question. I mean, I don't know what your experience.
No, it does. It does. The experience in South Asia is, I believe, it's an extension to Missouri, because while there it's show me, here we always hear show me now. So I think what you're talking about 6 months, at times, I've seen clients get impatient even going through that process of 6 months.
Well,
they want the results immediately. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll actually see results in 3 months. But what we like to do, so you're going to prove if somebody's a show me,
That's
what
true.
we
I
do
agree.
is we've got to get everybody set up, we've got everybody trained, and then we set the benchmark. Okay, where are we now at the start? And we measure that. And then each week we're looking at, and we chart it out. And it's amazing to watch how it ebbs and flows and gets to that point. And some factories get there quicker and others. So I like to set expectations so that factories understand that, it's a process. There's a learning process. You're relearning how to run your factory. And because now you're being bombarded with all this information, and then it takes some time to learn how to utilize it in the most effective way, to coach people on how to do that. And that's where the magic happens. you're instantly going to see efficiency improvement based on feedback just to the operator. But it's when you get this whole operation, quality, mechanics, supervisors, as a well-oiled machine, that's when you really take those next steps and you position yourself to get from where you are, which is 40 to 45 or 50%, up to that 85% efficiency. That's the goal over time to get to. And in order to do that, you need to get yourself set up right to do it.
Sure. And I think also the biggest change management is on the shop floor, where everybody's so used to shoving things under, keeping the data in their control, not really giving out the right perspective on what's happening and trying to kind of manipulate it, vis-a-vis the extreme alternative of being completely transparent and being an understanding on a minute by minute basis on what the status is of any particular style, order, to the lowest SKU in terms of size. I think so. That's a big shift, and that's what a shop floor control system can do.
Yeah,
so that's
I mentioned
please.
before, it makes everybody accountable.
Yeah,
Everybody's under the spotlight, but everybody is, while they're under the spotlight, they're being empowered to do better. And
that's true.
people naturally, once you realize there's nowhere to hide anymore, now all you can do is bring out your best. So your energy is focused on productivity, not hiding the fact that you're not productive.
No, and that's very important, because then you can set your targets right, your KPIs right, and you can also be sure that what you are measuring is against the right performance that you are evaluating. So I think that it really helps for organizations to grow, not just in terms of efficiencies, but also in terms of human capital. And but so that's one part of it, and the other part of it is, I've very often seen that, and even most of the clients where we talk of digitization, they get concerned about report structures, about how the data is looking to them. They come back saying that we want to see a data in a certain way. And, even while they are prospecting or evaluating what tool to look at, they start talking of customization, they start talking of looking at the data in a certain way. How do you react to that?
Well, it's interesting. The hardest thing to deal with as an entrepreneur who understands, listen, I've been very successful. I've built this 1,000 machine or 500 or 200 machine factory.
No, but that's a fact. You can't take that away. That's a fact.
No, you can't. That I have, I have my secret sauce, and I don't want to give that up because this is what's gotten me here. And so there is. I always say human beings are amazing creatures because we can change and adapt to anything, but at the same time we hate doing it. So what I always try to coach people to do is to say, we can create any report you could ever want, as long as the root data is there. And there's virtually every piece of data you could imagine. So recreating the reports, the question is, after they've gone through, this stage of this first 3 to 6 months, do they really need it anymore? So I always tell people, we can build that report, but live without it for a couple of months and then see if you really need it. And the beautiful thing is that most of these really good solutions are coming with a reporting tool, BI tool, so they can probably create. There's probably reports that they have in their mind that they could never get. So sometimes what happens is, as long as they know they can get it, and in some cases there is a unique aspect of their business where that might make sense. But for the most part, I always say, wait 90 days.
Yeah.
Not going to kill you. Yeah. and trust the process. And so sometimes it's a little bit of a give and take, but for the most part, my recommendation is don't do it until you absolutely have. Number one, it costs money. And number two, it may not be the best thing anymore. Right. And that's very hard.
I agree. I think that's what I have also been doing. I've actually told clients to, kind of be patient, take a step back, start looking at the reports, understand that data first, uh, analyze it, look at how the data is being presented. There is so much of work that has gone behind creating this kind of a report, and we know how you can make it use better. And even after then, after 6 months, you say that there is certain thing or certain tweak that is required. That can obviously be looked at, but in most cases, when you start something, start the process of evaluation on customization, it becomes very tricky, and I think that's a really no go. So I'll take a trickier topic in terms of investments on you know the investment on shop floor control systems for most factories. They still look at it as a cost, at least in our part of the world, in certain cases. And it's not that there are no exceptions. There are people who've really put in a lot of technology and a lot of differentiation through digitization, and they've been forerunners in their way themselves, including in countries like India and Bangladesh, which is the key geography that we handle. But there are still a lot of people who look at it as a cost. So how do you look at how have you come across similar instances also?
Never. Of course, in every instance, it's there, and it's very interesting. Um, Factory owners invest in incredible technology that they can see, touch, and feel. If you look at the machinery around the factories, and you go to any denim factory and look at the laundry facilities and look at the amount of investment that's there, because they can see it, they can touch it, they understand it. The challenge that I think we have, Amit, in both of our positions, you advising, both of us advising, clients, uh, is that it's something they don't necessarily understand completely. A factory owner absolutely understands the value of an automated sewing machine, the
Sure.
attachment, and understands to get that level of productivity, they got to spend 5,000 instead of 500. And they can look at it and they can make a decision right there on the spot. This is a little more foreign to them in terms of the subtlety. A lot of people can't tell the difference between, the low cost, I got to do something, or I don't even need to do anything. I don't need this. I've been running my factory the way it is. And so it's why we went away from, as a first pass of selling the entire factory. We used to never like to run pilots, and frankly, I mean, it's not something we love doing, but I think it helps get the factory owners over. It helps them to understand and put them in that same position. So yeah, it is a challenge, and it's an educational challenge that I think that as consultants that we have to rise to, recognize, and really help the these factory owners that know how to make garments really well, and technology may or may not be their strong suit. But I think as the younger generation starts to take over, the second generation starts to take over these factories, they are much more, they're oriented from day one,
Sure.
in digitization and utilizing this. So I think it's a much easier concept to grasp. But I do think it is a challenge, and I think that, again, running these pilots, convincing them to make the smaller investment to prove it out, so it's something they can see, I think is the road to bridge the gap between where their knowledge is and where it needs to be in order to make the best decision for their factories.
Sure. So Fred, also, see, CGS has been deploying the Blue Cherry software shop flow control systems for a very, very long time now. I've known you even longer, and you've been into this whole setup of suggesting and consulting clients on shop floor solutions. What do you think is a typical ROI in your experience for say let's take example of Blue Cherry's shop floor control systems. How do you think the ROIs work there?
So when you think of ROI, you're going to get a payback in less than a year. In other words,
Oh,
systems
that's
bought, paid
fantastic.
for, and then it's just printing money after that point. And I think that if anybody takes a calculator out and says, if my factory was 30% more efficient and I had 20% less quality
Quality
defects, which of
issues.
course drives to how much money is that worth to me? What
True.
is the real value? And in most of these factories, you're talking about a big number. It's not a small number. And I think the hardest thing I think is to convince people that that's a real number. And again, I go back to prove it out. You know, give the best solution a chance in your factory, because there is definitely a difference between a low cost solution and one that has been honed and beaten to death over 40 years and evolved through the course of time. And I think that, and it also the secret also to getting that kind of ROI is the coaching and education that a good consulting organization can drive to these factories to make it happen. So that the ROI is ridiculously good. I
No,
mean,
and
almost
I
to the
think,
point of a no-brainer.
yeah,
But
that's remarkable again, because I think if you're looking at a 30% improvement and a reduction in quality, saving manpower, all of that can really give you a very, very sharp ROIs. Uh, I think the problem, at least in South Asia, I've also seen with a few clients, and again, this is not representative of all, but with a few clients, that the factories, they do invest into digitization on the shop floor controls, but are still not able to make the impact because they don't put in the right resources or the right training to get into the right analytics, which is what they should be doing by having so much data. And in a way, there the process is digitized, but they're not able to put it to the best of use, and that becomes a big challenge. And that's where you don't get up to the uh, improvement in efficiencies as much as you would want, and hence the ROIs get delayed. So that's also a kind of issue that needs to be addressed. And I personally feel that in the process of getting into the digitization, it should be very clear top down on what is it that they want to impact and how that impact should come in. And unless that is clearly defined and understood by the senior leadership in the organization, it will not have a full impact.
no, I totally agree, and I think that oftentimes what happens in these projects is, and a factory owner signs off on it, and they're like, "Well, I don't know anything about computers, so I'm going to turn it over to my IT guy and let and then they kind of step aside." What we do is we force the inclusion of all the leadership at the outset and explain what their role is. I think it's very important that everybody understands the role they're going to play and what success looks like, and draw a map for them basically on how are we going to do this? What is everybody's role and responsibility? What are the expected results? And then having regular meetings when things are not happening the way that we drew it up. We're not getting cooperation here. This is where what I've found, and I've been doing this for 35 years, which is a long time, is that every failed implementation has a common reason. And it is when the top management doesn't get involved and stay involved, your likelihood of failure is at its highest. You
That's
can
true.
get lucky. But when the top gets involved and stays involved, because it's life and death for these factories, and you're talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars here of savings that's on the line here. I don't think there's anything more important that anybody could be doing. So it's really about designing the educational track. It's about making sure that the project management and the inclusion of everybody the right escalation, meetings and updates, so that everybody's involved and everybody's being taken along the path. I think that's really, and most factories, they're looking at the educational aspect, and they're saying make it half, or make it I don't want to spend that kind of money.
Sure.
And part of the coaching, I think, that has to happen is it's like, if you want your kid to be a software engineer, they have to go to grade school, they have to go to high school, and they have to go to college, and oftentimes an advanced degree. Well, your factory and the implementation of this technology, it's like saying, okay, in third grade, you're good. We don't need to invest in anymore. You'll be a software engineer. So it's almost the same kind of thing, is to understand that you're learning an entire new skill, and that's something that you're not going to come by naturally. It's not the natural way that people think. So the coaching part of it is part of how you get to that ROI. And so when you look at the cost versus where the ROI is, it's a matter of making that factory owner, that decision maker, understand, okay, I have to make the investment. Here's why. And so it takes some time. And I think that as consultants, we have to be patient and recognize that, our clients, they need to understand, and they need to be taken through. It's a journey.
Sure.
Just like educating a child, it's a journey.
Sure. And I think, interestingly, we are at a point where we're discussing people, and I'll bring that up here on, how can digitization itself be a training tool for not just operatives, but supervisors, quality inspectors, so that's a qualitative benefit, doesn't come in the number ROI, but, improve the quality of the people, which will then enable you to reach that ROI.
Well, think about this. Let's just take a day in the life of an operator, and let's boil it down to that. So the operator has a tablet. We all know what a tablet is. It could be just like your smartphone sitting right there. And what if the operator is getting a new style and they want to understand a little bit more about the style? They can push a button and look at the style specifications. They can push a button and watch a video of the operation that they're performing to see the right method, how to load the machine, how to, and so you have essentially an instructor right there so the digitization of just a simple thing like, how do I do my job, that they can always refer back to. Or if somebody's training them, they can say, okay, let's watch this video, and here's how you get to it. And then as information comes about the defects that the quality people are either finding at the end of the line or in the line, that can cause the engineers in the factory or the floor supervisors to know what to train them on, right? If there's a problem, maybe, it would cause them to observe that operator, or maybe it would cause them to observe the machine and say, wait a minute, we need a mechanic out here. This machine is not right. This isn't the operator's problem. The machine is not revving to the right RPM, and so the stitch is not happening the way it should. So think about just the impact on one operator, and you've got 1,000 of them or 500 of them that are all being impacted simultaneously. And this information is then being distilled so that you can get exception reporting, which is, what are my top 10 defects? What are my top 10 styles that have defects? What defects are in those styles? What defects are happening with this operator? And it goes on and on and on and on. The questions and answers that you can get because you're getting this data and you have it in real time, you can impact proactively your factory in ways you could never imagine.
That's brilliant, Fred. And so I think we also have a few questions which we'll take in a while. I can also just connect with the audience, the participants. If you have any questions, just drop in, and we'll try and see if we can take a few of them in the current session. So it'll be great if I can have questions. While I've started getting questions on the side. If anyone else has, please do drop in.
I think we've got a couple of questions up now. It might be fun to just answer a few of them and keep everybody engaged.
Yeah, sure. So, Nitesh, I think let's take this. He's saying, can you please show how Blue Cherry solution actually works? A short demo would be helpful. And the tech behind it is which differentiates it from other solutions. Lastly, who are your major customers in India currently using your own system? I personally don't think we should get into a demo. This was never meant to be a demo.
Yeah,
And
we wouldn't.
we can, you know,
we can
yeah,
schedule. I think Nitesh, which would be great, is to link up with Amit, and I think we can have a private conversation, private demo, and understand a little bit more about your factory, and we'd be happy and would love to have the opportunity to talk to you about all of those things.
yeah, sure, absolutely. So there's another question which says how to inculcate the habit of using data knowledge of digitization in management from a top-down perspective. I think you did cover, but if there are any comments, I think we can talk about it.
Yeah, so Ankit, it really starts with understanding what, training from top to bottom, what's available, and then building a process and a daily regimen that we coach companies to, on starting with the operators to the floor supervisors to the production managers to the top plant management. And so it really is about creating a daily discipline and an ongoing minute by minute discipline. And that's part of what we do as we onboard a factory is to teach each of those levels how to get the information out of the system and then what to do with it. As scenarios come up, and that's the beautiful thing is once it gets introduced into the line, scenarios are going to come up, and it's then teaching people new habits. And so it's a coaching exercise, and it's very deliberate what we do. Because when you're been in hundreds of factories, you understand what it takes in order for those factories, what type of information can impact that, that productivity, that efficiency, that quality reduction. And we teach and coach people how to do that. So I hope that answers your question.
Sure. So, Fred, also, I see with so many solutions available today, and everybody trying to offer, various kind of benefits. From a manufacturer perspective, what criteria or what indices should be used to evaluate some of those options that are available today? I mean, out of your experience, you've seen a few of them yourself. How do you think somebody should best evaluate those options?
So I think that when you evaluate a company and you evaluate a product, I think you have to look deeply into how is that product going to impact your particular factory? How is the company that's going to provide it? What expertise do they have? Who are the people that are going to come and implement it? There's a big difference between somebody who has, 10, 15, 20 years of experience working in a factory as engineers or as engineering consultants versus someone who knows how to push the buttons. I think,
Sure.
Training somebody how to use a tool like this, teaching them how to push the buttons is the easy part. The hard part, where the real work happens, where the rubber really hits the road, if you will, is how do you take someone's knowledge of running and operating these facilities and impart that on this factory as you onboard it.
Sure.
And so I think that the devil a lot of times is in the details. You know, a lot of these systems they track WIP. A lot of systems do quality. It's the degree that they do it. It's the level of data capture. It's the level of reporting analysis, but it's also the secret sauce is teaching someone how to optimize what they bought. You know, it doesn't happen without tremendous knowledge sharing. And I think that you need to evaluate, a company's ability to really drive meaningful results, not just take you live and say, look, we track WIP and here's our WIP report, but where was the impact? Where is the reduction in quality? And talk to customers and understand what really happened. There's a lot of nice people. There's a lot of people that give great support, but
Sure.
did you get an impact? Did you see a 30% improvement in efficiency? Did your quality come down 20% or not? What really happened? Because in the end, if you invest a small amount of money and get nothing for it, you threw it away. If you invest a little bit more and you get a incredible result, now you've done something. So that's
Yeah, I think typically when I'm sure similar promoters have to go and buy cars, they will buy the best ones because they know they offer certain value for a certain and the certain benefits. But then when you have to look at a shop flow control system, you would you try and tend to uh, look at options which are low on cost, etc. We also have a question on similar lines, and while we have spoken about it, we'll just quickly touch base on that again. Nanta Kumar says that how does a small factory, when our order volumes are small, considering the initial cost, how do we justify the investment of a digital transformation? And what cost-saving features does the solution provide in managing such a transition?
So I think you have to look at a simple math equation is what would be the impact if you had 20% less defects, and what would be the impact if your operators were 30 to 50% more efficient? What does that translate into dollars? Because in the end, it's interesting that you get more efficient. It's interesting that you get better quality. But when you think about it, there is hard dollars that you can measure. And then there's the other measurements that are not hard dollars, which are hard to quantify, but are important, which is, does having that technology give you an advantage when you are attracting new customers to your factory? When you look world-class, people pay world-class prices.
Absolutely.
You attract world-class customers. Could this system grow your business? Will it enable you to provide better information back to your customers? You bet it will. And it's about retention of your existing customers and attracting new ones. And for small factories, the hardest thing you're going to have is retaining your customers, because you're going to be the first factory in their mix that they're going to look to exit, unless you are so good and that your factory is one in which they want to say, you know what, I want another line here. I want another 50 operators. I want another 100 operators. And then word gets around, and then people start knocking on your door, and you're trying to figure out, how am I going to build another building? Because I'm out of space. So, I think you have to look at things. Small factories, the return on investment per operator, and it is the same. It's just a question of, and I think it's harder for smaller factories to wrap around and make that initial investment, which is why so many of the companies, including ours, have moved to a SaaS model. So you pay, a quarterly fee instead of a bigger upfront, fee for software maintenance, so that you amortize it over time. So I hope that
Yeah,
answers
I
your question.
think it does. I think it's a way of thinking. It's a way you want to run your manufacturing. And as long as you're very clear that you want to do a world-class manufacturing setup, uh, the cost is can be justified by various means that we have discussed over the last hour and a half. It is not just about improving the efficiencies, it's about training your people better. It's about taking your factory to the next level completely, to be able to attract more customers, to be able to bring in be more competitive, to be able to be more transparent, and be able to handle all the complexities that the customers are throwing at you today. So I think all of these are very, very substantial gains that happens over a period of time. And cost, well, is only a certain element to it. The kind of benefits that anybody would accrue far, far supersede the cost that goes into it. So it should not be looked as a cost. It should be looked at primarily from the perspective on how you want to run your organization, uh, and how do you future proof your organization. I don't think any organization today can afford not to be digitized on the way the entire scenario globally is changing as far as sourcing is concerned, because that's what gives you the kind of the confidence in your manufacturing, that you have control. You can transparently tell your customers on what you're doing, transparently know yourself on what you're doing, and use analytics and data to improve your factories continuously over a period of time. And I think that's the whole crux of digitization typically today. I think we have a few more questions. Arjun says, how do digital solutions help reduce operational cost compared to traditional manufacturing methods? I think we've already covered this. We've recorded the webinar, and Arjun, I'll suggest you can come back to us in case you joined in late. And we'll be happy to share the recorded session with you. It has been very, very insightful, and I'm sure if you go through it in detail, it'll really help you understand how a digitized world can make a significant impact on manufacturing.
I think there's a
Uh,
question about AI, Amit. I think it's a great question, and
yeah,
it,
please go ahead. So it says, how much effective could AI be in data governance towards digitization of production at the factories? Because at the end, AI too has restrictions on governance after a certain point of time.
yeah. So Samir, I think it's interesting that you bring up AI, and I think that in terms of naming a product, Microsoft really struck a chord with me when their AI tool they call Copilot. And I like to think of and the way that we're investing in AI in our solutions is we're looking at AI only as a co-pilot, meaning that it's going to be able to sift through a lot of data and make some recommendations and do some analysis. But in terms of my opinion on AI, it's your co-pilot that you use to help, but it's not. It should never be designed, in my mind, to autonomously make a decision. Because I think from a governance perspective, you have to be very careful because you could make decisions that could impact people's lives, right? Whether it could be a hire fire decision, um, it could be expansion in your factory. It could be a number of things. But I think that AI can help in driving information that's actionable to a human being that can analyze it and then make that decision. But I'm very much at this point in agreement with you that governance with AI needs to be very carefully implemented. And so in our design for AI within our applications, that's exactly the mindset that we use. Hope that answered your question.
Sure. Uh, so Fred, I think it's been a great session. The last 1.5 hours, extremely insightful. Didn't even realize it was 1.5 hours already. Uh, Extremely thankful and delighted to have you as a in that you joined us today. I think all the participants would have also really enjoyed the conversation. Uh, we've tried to be threadbare, and we've spoken about a lot of things really upfront to make everybody understand on how digitization can impact garment manufacturing processes, uh, where all they can be used, what are the potential improvements that they can look at, along with the what can be the prospective ROIs when they get or when they set up shop floor control systems. Thank you so much, Fred. Any closing remarks?
No, I really appreciate it. It's always fun to get together and talk. We've had
Absolutely.
conversations over the last 25 years, and this was one of the most memorable ones. And I hope that everybody that had an opportunity to join us today enjoyed what we had to say, learned something, and again, we're both Amit and I are happy to meet with you to talk about anything that's on your mind, or any interest that you might have in a solution or consulting that can help your factories become more efficient. That's our goal.
Sure.
Really, in the end, it's about making meaningful investments and impacting your factory and your future. And we would love to be a part of it.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. And I hope you also could benefit from the insights that were discussed today in the conversation. In case, as Fred mentioned, you need any assistance or you need any more discussion, please do get back to us. We'll be happy to take the discussion forward. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Fred.
You're welcome. Thanks so much.
Yeah.